being with us today to celebrate the life of our beautiful mom, Helen Elizabeth Youngren Schilperoort. It's quite moving to stand here and look out at all of you, knowing that you've come, many of you, from a great distance, because you too love and have been loved by our mom. So today we're going to honor her together. We're going to share memories and stories, scripture and poetry and music that she loved. So let's begin by standing together to sing a favorite among the innumerable hymns that Mom knew by heart, Blessed Assurance, Jesus is Mine.
Well, I guess I have to be next because I'm the oldest. But for those of you who were at the grave or at the cemetery for the service, this is going to be similar. I didn't write that down, so I don't know. It won't be exact, but I'm going to be reading 1 Corinthians 13, the love chapter, but it's going to be my version. And giving it more of an interpretation as it relates to my mom and what a loving person she was. So anyway, if I speak in the tongues of humans and angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. Well, I was thinking of what our house was like with 5 kids and the neighbor kids, and Mom giving us piano lessons, who are now our cousins, piano lessons, that it was pretty noisy. And then as we became teenagers, it even got noisier. But then, where it talks about prophetic powers, Mom knew what we were like in church because Dad was up there and Mom was at the organ, and here we were sitting down there fooling around, and she would give us a look because she prophetically knew we were going to be fooling around. But Dad had always given us lifesavers to help us calm down. But she was good at knowing we were going to be doing something. So if I have all faith but have not love, then I have nothing. If I give away all I have, and if I deliver my body to be burned but have not love. There were too many ands in there. But if I have all faith so as to remove mountains but have not love, I am nothing. If I give away all I have, and if I deliver my body to be burned but have not love, I have gained nothing. Now this next part, in the scripture part, I think really describes Mom, where it talks about love is patient and kind. Love is not jealous or boastful. It's not arrogant or rude. My mom had to be incredibly patient, being married to a farmer with 5 kids and loving all the neighborhood kids around. And also, I think of the job that she had along with Aunt Alice of working in the school district and all the children that she ministered to and took care of and went to their homes and washed their hair and combed their knits out and made sure that when children had been abused, that there was justice done, that they would be taken care of. That takes a real love, I believe. And the part that says love does not insist on its own way, is not irritable or resentful. I think sometimes a loving person can be a little irritable. And that's okay. It also says here that it does not rejoice at wrong, but rejoices in the right. And Mom also stood up for her children and believed bullying was wrong. So verse 7, love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. They had a loving relationship that endured for 73 years. And it's amazing, their love never ended. Then it says, as for prophecy, it will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. Knowledge. But when the perfect comes, I sure don't know when that's going to be. The imperfect will pass away. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. When I became a woman, I gave up some of my childish ways. A few. So faith, hope, and love abides. Of these 3, the greatest is love, and that's my mom.
Hi, I'm very honored and blessed to be here this afternoon to share in this celebration with all of you. I'm Carrie Quack Juarez, and my dad, Harry Quack, and Carl and John Schilperoort were first cousins. And their wives, my mom and Vera and Helen and our dads, were all an active part of the community church for many, many years. So I grew up knowing Helen as the church pianist my whole life. And that was was a wonderful thing. And years ago, probably 40, 45 years ago, the church was honoring Helen for all her years of service. And Dad asked me to write something. He used to write poems too. Those of you who know him know that. And he asked me to write something. So the kids asked me to share this today. And I have to put out a little disclaimer. It's a little bit cheesy and a little bit old school, but it was written with much love and admiration, and that never changed. There is a lady in our church. She's been here for some time. She's very recognizable because she plays so fine. This lady's name is Helen, and I'm sure you will agree that when those chords come rolling out, they're always right on key. Her music has a special touch. It's full of inspiration. To hear her play will make you say, let's have a singspiration. Many times she's called upon to play right on the spot. She always smiles and says okay and gives it all she's got. Her services for glad days and for sad days are required. Her music is unlimited. That's why she's so admired. And if her playing's not enough, she has a lovely voice. When there's a need for altos, Helen's everyone's first choice. But we love her more than just for her ability, because topping all that talent is a great personality. She's a loving Christian woman with a warm and ready smile. She's the kind of gal you'd like to sit and talk with for a while. She's married to a handsome man. Yes, Carl thinks she's great. And she's raised 5 lovely kids who say their mom's first rate. She's blessed our church in many ways in service to the King and gives her time unselfishly to help with everything. So Helen, here's our loving thanks. God keep you evermore. And in our hearts we always say, encore, encore, encore.
I suppose I can move this down.
He'll set it for you.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
Put this. Okay. Hello out there. I'm pretty sure of one thing. I'm one person who knew Helen longer than anybody else in here. I will never forget the first time I met her. My handsome, popular brother could have had any girl he wanted. There were plenty of them chasing him. He dated several of them, but fell for none. Not until he met this stunning Swedish blonde at a Youth for Christ rally in Yakima, where we went every Saturday night. Helen just stole his heart, and evidently he stole hers. So she was the most beautiful blonde I'd ever seen, and she quickly became accepted by the family as the perfect partner for Carl. I recall the first house they lived in, that little cottage at the bottom of the hill. I couldn't believe how Helen managed all of the household chores and bringing up 5 kids in that little tiny home, and yet she seemed to do it without a complaint. At least I never heard any. Apparently the kids slept in bunk beds and maybe on the floor. Laundry, cooking, cleaning
all became shared by the kids as they grew old enough to help. Helen never complained. After they moved into a brand new house that Carl finally managed to provide for them, things were much improved. I think Signe must have been about 8 years old. Is that right? Anyway, Dad Carl had finally come through with a promise to provide a real home for the family. Helen was a huge part of making that home a place for hospitality, welcoming many family and friends to wonderful home-cooked meals and having fun. That's what she liked. She was an expert at playing Mexican train. My dear husband, C.E., was not a lover of parlor games. While our family played pit and Yahtzee and Trivial Pursuit, he would sit in his chair and read the newspaper. But Helen would not allow that. She charmed him into coming to the table saying, "I'll teach you." Well, C.E. actually entered into playing the game, and when we got home, he went and bought a double set of dominoes so we could play Mexican train. That's how magical she was. I always admired Helen in the way she conducted her life as a wife, mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. She earned the love and respect not only of her own kids, but their many friends whom they brought home. Helen's 5 children demonstrated amazing devotion while taking turns taking care of both their parents in their declining years. Our family was especially blessed when we came home from furlough overseas to have Helen and Carl welcome 1 or 2 of our kids into their home. This continued after they were here in college while we were still back in overseas, but they had no place to go for summer vacations or holidays. Such kindness and generosity is hard to repay. My other brothers and their wives opened their homes too. God bless them. Another thing I enjoyed with Helen and Carl was traveling together. After we came back here and settled in Olympia, C.E. just loved to plan trips. You heard about the fabled trip to the Canadian Rockies when Connie and Phoebe were with us, and we were so anxious to show them the beautiful Canadian Rocky Mountains covered with snow. And that whole trip, we never saw a mountain covered with snow. It was cloudy and rainy, but no snow on the mountains. You heard that story. But Carl and Helen also went with us to the beach at Long Beach. We stayed at the Chautauqua and drove to museums in the area. We went to Astoria, climbed the Astoria Tower, and visited all the museums around the Lewis and Clark Living Museum, and just had a wonderful time with them. They loved traveling with us. Helen lived out her spiritual faith wholeheartedly, using her musical talent in the Lord's service, teaching Bible classes, and being the kind of woman her children call blessed. She inspired me and many others by her example. I look forward to seeing her again in the place of eternal dwelling, together with our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and with others who have gone before. Zaijian, dearly beloved Helen. See you again soon.
Hi, I just want to see how loud it is because I have a really loud voice. I am Carl and Helen Schilperoort's granddaughter, Ashley Thompson. Hi. Why should I feel discouraged? And why should the shadows come? Why should my heart feel lonely, oh lonely, and long for heaven and a home? When Jesus is my portion, my constant friend is He. His eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches over me. So I sing because I'm happy, and I sing because I am free. God's eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches over me.
So you can tell we're really planned out well here. Are you going first?
Sure.
Okay. I'm the youngest, and so of course I was Mom's favorite. That isn't true, actually. She really didn't show favoritism. My mom was always there for all of her kids. For me, that meant that she was willing to travel 3 times overseas on very long flights to Asia to be with me and my family. In the Philippines, she winced audibly as my husband Fred drove crazily along the edge of a cliff. In Cambodia, she insisted that she was not going to ride on an elephant, but she was coaxed into it that day, doing it so that she could be up there on that elephant with her new granddaughter. My mom gave so many things, but one of the most impactful things she did for me was how she always modeled for us the importance of taking care of and including in our lives those that were less fortunate than we were. During the holidays, she always invited friends and relatives who would have been alone. She gently encouraged me to befriend kids who were new at school or who were left out. She treated everyone as equals. My siblings and I are so fortunate to have had our mom and dad with us for so many years. I so treasure the time I had with them.
The past year has brought the end of many things for our country and our world, and for us on a personal level in the life of our family. When recently we found a new owner for the little house down the road where our family got its start back in 1952, it brought full circle a cycle of farewells that has included the big house up on the hill, our dad, and now our mom. Many losses, a lot of loss. A time for grieving, but also a time for gratitude, for celebrating the incredible generosity and blessing our parents gave to us. In her book, Finding the Mother Tree. Suzanne Simard writes, when mother trees, the majestic hubs at the center of forest communication, protection, and sentience, die, they pass their wisdom to their kin, generation after generation, sharing the knowledge of what helps and what harms, who is friend or foe, and how to adapt and survive in an ever-changing landscape. That's what parents do. One aspect of our mom's wisdom that she passed down to us was her deep and steadfast faith that guided her through her life. Her Swedish parents raised her and her brothers in a Pentecostal church in Sila. She once told me that when she was growing up, church could be really scary, and that after marrying Dad, it was a relief to be at the Harry Union Church. Nobody was slayed in the spirit, speaking in tongues, or rolling in the aisles at Harry Union Church. Mom was not one to talk much about her faith. More important for her was to simply live it, which she did quietly for the most part, in practical, day-to-day, tangible ways. There is no doubt that Mom was gifted. She could do everything. But of her many gifts, I think that the one for which she will be most remembered was her boundless gift for hospitality. It seemed to just come naturally to her, and to give her and the lucky ones who received it great joy. She was unflappable. Even when we lived, all 7 of us, in that little 2-bedroom house down the road, Dad would add leaves to the table, extending it out into the living room, and together they would host a crowd for dinner. She was an amazing cook and baker, something I think probably everybody in this room today knows from their own experience. Who's had dinner at Mom's? Who's had one of Mom's dinners? Yeah, I think quite a few of you have. Saturday night tacos? I know you, Bill Hansen, had a lot of Saturday night tacos. How about a piece of her nectarine pie while sitting out on the deck, looking out over the valley like a slice of the earth's curvature? That pie was so good. I don't think we kids realized how spoiled we were growing up with that. Her home-baked bread and cookies. We didn't have Oreos or Wonder Bread in our lunches at school. We often had cousins or friends staying with us, some for months at a time, and she warmly welcomed them all. Mom's hospitality wasn't limited to our house either, to our home. She would often take meals to people who were suffering illness or loss. And in her work as a school nurse, she was courageous and compassionate, bringing food and blankets into the homes of families who were living in poverty. If Mom saw a need, she did something about it. I feel so lucky to have so many wonderful memories of Mom and Dad that will fill up the canyons in my heart now that they're gone. When I imagine Mom living her faith, doing her best to follow a Christian path, I'll always see this big, expansive table full of food, delicious food that she has lovingly prepared, unconditionally, with no strings attached. Everyone is welcome to her table, not in spite of, but because of who they are. Unique people deserving of love, created in God's image. At Mom's table, there's generosity and kindness. There is mercy. There is laughter and joy. There is love and acceptance and mutual respect. And there's always room for another plate. Come in. Have something to eat, she says. Sounds a lot to me like what the real meaning of communion is, and unmistakably our mom. Doesn't the world today just need a lot more people like our mom? Thank you, Mom. how we will miss you.
Dawned on me as we're standing up here that when we were little kids, the family was Colleen, Bob, and the three little girls. The three little girls have finally grown up. Yes. Oh, gosh.
Talk about your dress.
I have to tell you about my dress. This dress was my mother's, and it's right. Do not touch the microphone. I don't know. 40 years ago, Mom and I were going through a closet in the house, and this came out, and I said, "Wow, Mom, that's a great dress." And somehow I got it, and when I was thinking, what should I wear today? This came out, and I asked a couple of my daughters, and one said, "Wear it," and the other one said, maybe not for this event. But anyway, this was Mom's dress that she probably wore in the 40s, or late 40s and early 50s, so it's really fun to be wearing it. And it was always fun to go clothes shopping with her because she enjoyed having some nice clothes. So anyway, so I think it was Jerry Seinfeld who once said, "If it's not one thing, it's your mother." Poor Jerry, he didn't have a mother like mine or ours. One of my first memories of my mom is waking up in the morning, again in our little house, the sun streaming through the kitchen window and into our bedroom. And from where
All of us were sleeping.
Right, yes. And from where I was lying in bed, the dust motes in the sun, there was a sunbeam coming through the kitchen window, and those dust motes were just gently swirling about. I could see Mom in the kitchen putting eggs in the pan to boil and slicing homemade bread for us to have for toast. And I remember just such a feeling of peacefulness at such a very young age. It was really wonderful. It wasn't until I had 2 children under the age of 2 that I began to marvel at how my mom had raised 5 kids, 9 years apart in age, doing all the tasks she considered to be a mother's work. And as Colleen mentioned, Sundays were an important day in our upbringing, and preparations began Saturday night. First our baths, then Mom putting pin curls in my and my sister's straight hair so that we would have a few curls fluttering around our heads to look our Sunday best. There was a love and tenderness in this Saturday night ritual that I didn't appreciate until I was much older. Then before heading out the door for church, our curls were hairsprayed in place, and the fried chicken or the pot roast that would be our Sunday dinner was browned and in the oven. As we entered the church, Mom would head to the piano, and we kids would plop down in a pew with Dad. And as Colleen had said, once the sermon started, we kids anticipated another Sunday ritual, Dad passing a pack of multi-flavored Lifesavers down our row, hoping it would keep us quiet until the interminable sermon ended. Of course, music and playing the piano were an integral part of our upbringing. It's amazing. Mom gave piano lessons to kids after school and on Saturdays in that little house. If we weren't with Dad out in the field, somehow she had drilled into us that we had to find something quiet to do during those lessons. Once in a while, she'd throw an annoyed glance if one of us was being too noisy. And amazingly, she was our first piano teacher, too. Living in that small house, sitting next to her on a 3-foot by 1.5-foot piano bench, she did it with all 5 of us. There was more mother love flowing from her to us in that small space. I didn't take lessons too much longer. Oh, wait a minute. No doubt for her own sanity, she eventually passed us on to other teachers. I didn't take lessons too much longer, which I eventually regretted. Years later, I whined to Mom and Dad, to Mom, that she liked Colleen and Bob better than me because she made them practice but let me quit. Yes, dear, she replied. I'm surprised it took you this long to figure that out. You'll get over it. Our Grandpa Youngren immigrated from Sweden as a young adult, and our grandma was born to Swedish immigrant parents. They practiced a variety of Swedish influences and traditions in raising Mom and her brothers, and Mom continued those with us. The most celebrated was the traditional Christmas Eve dinner of lutefisk with white sauce, boiled potatoes, Swedish rye bread, and Swedish meatballs. We began those dinners reciting a Swedish prayer and then began our feasting. Year after year, we enjoyed this culinary tradition. The highlight of the dinner, lutefisk quivering on the platter, made more palatable with ample servings of white sauce, allspice, and white pepper. As our family grew to include sons-in-laws, Mom was so happy that Daryl, Doug, Christopher, and Fred also looked forward to that Christmas Eve and dining on the mouth-watering lutefisk. Do I hear an amen, guys? After Mom retired from her job as school nurse, she had more time to spend doing things she enjoyed. She loved being with her grandchildren and made sure her cookie jar was always full. Often she and her good friend and neighbor, Jerry Brandt, would walk together through the orchards and up and down the hills on our road. Eventually, Mom developed arthritis in her feet, which made brisk walking painful. So she joined the Yakima Lions Pool water walking group. When my sisters and I would visit Mom and Dad, we would go with her into the pool. Later, I would tell Doug about our time in the water, and he would pause and say, "Only the Schilperoort women can walk on water." Yes, Mom was a saint to him, too. Our mothers are our primal connection to our embodied life. Losing our mothers touches us at the core of our soul. My mom and dad were my anchor. Dad's passing last year loosened the grip on that anchor. With my mom's passing, the anchor has been released, and I am adrift. After we moved to New York, Mom and I had frequent phone conversations. When we'd exhausted every topic of interest and it was time to end our conversation and get on to the rest of our day, sometimes we just couldn't let go of each other. Thus began our goodbye ritual. Bye, I'd say. Bye, she'd reply. Adios, adios. Hasta la vista, hasta la vista. Auf Wiedersehen, auf Wiedersehen. Tot ziens, ciao, dag, sayonara. Pretty soon we'd start giggling and we'd go back and forth and she'd start with hasta la pasta. Hasta mañana, iguana. See you later, alligator. After a while, crocodile. Toodaloo, buckaroo. Eventually, we had to say goodbye. So we would have a long, drawn-out bye, and then, I love you, Mom. I love you, too. I've had to say goodbye to my mom's physical body. For me, and for many of us here, she is still with us in so many memories. I can hear her singing the alto part in Silver Bells during the holiday sing-along this past December. I feel her warmth when I cozy up in the Afghan she knit for me. I can hear her saying, Carl, answer the phone. And if she's watching us today, I hope she's not saying, Adriana, what are you saying that for? Oh, your presence here is very special for us. Thank you for sharing in the celebration of the life of my wonderful mother.
hear from Mom's cousin, Amy Jo Butler.
I'm happy to be here to celebrate Helen's life because she was important to me from when I was a young child. She was the big sister that my bigger sisters were 17 and 18 years older than me, but she was closer, and we did some fun things together too. And I have thank yous from my son, who was a part of the household on tennis times. He came with me and my mom to visit one summer and found Helen and Carl so welcoming that when he got old enough to be having to go to tournaments for tennis, he was happy to say, "Mom, would you ask Helen and Carl if I can come and stay with them when I'm in Yakima?" And so he did for about 4 years. And he remembers them as a home away from home, important to a kid at that age. But I have to tell you, one of the funny things that Helen and I did was we always greeted each other with these silly names. She would say, "Oh, hello, Mrs. Whatchamacallit," and I'd say, "Hello, Mrs. Wingading," and she'd say, "Hello, Mrs. McGillicuddy," and I'd say, "Hello, Mrs. Got Rocks." So when I was in the 8th grade, 9th grade, she came up to me and she said, "I would like you to meet my fiance. His name is Carl Schilperoort." And I burst out laughing. That's the funniest name I ever heard. The delightful thing is that they both forgave me for when I realized I shouldn't be laughing. So I did want to say that through my whole life, she and they were wonderful friends and family and supportive to me. And I'm glad that I was able to be, that she was in my life and I was able to be part of their family when I was able. And I adore all of the children that are theirs and celebrate that woman who made me laugh and called me Mrs. McGillicuddy sometimes. Thank you.
Well, I am Mom's favorite son. Yeah. It's good to see you all. I wonder where you and I might think of as home. We all have places we come from, but they may or may not be home to us anymore. I was born and raised here in the Yakima Valley, but I haven't lived here for over 50 years. My parents don't live here anymore. My grandparents, who all lived here, have died. So, can it still be home? Yet, it is a place that I know by heart. Many of my dearest friends and relatives still live here. I know its hills and valleys and views with my eyes closed. I can still see it sometimes in my dreams. And I wonder if you have a place like that, if you can still see it in your mind's eye. Many of us grew up in a religious tradition with the concept of the Trinity, a God with 3 parts in one. Now, that's one of those great mysteries of Christianity that is difficult for me to wrap my head around. But I find the idea of a duality of the marriage of two minds and two lives as an idea that I can embrace because I see it all around me. Mom and Dad were the embodiment of that duality. Two very individual people, unique, but who, when bound together with love, commitment, and faith, made each other better and more complete. They became home creators. Now, home for us was a place where consistency and stability of parents who unconditionally loved each other and us was present. They provided for and guided us by example and gave us fertile soil to grow in. Now, this doesn't mean that our home was never the scene of conflicts and disagreements. One of my favorite Shakespeare sonnets, the one about the marriage of true minds, has a line that says, "Love is an ever-fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken." It doesn't look away from those conflicts, no matter how tempting it might be to do so. In our house were the typical crises of kids growing up. Taking philosophical and lifestyle paths that called our parents' point of view into question. Evolving with political differences that left us having to agree to disagree. There were tempests, but mostly just squalls. But the overwhelming reality was that Mom and Dad's love and acceptance provided stability and the assured knowledge that we were loved and had a safe place where we belonged. Now, growing up with this unconditional love is not unique to our family. I know that most of you experienced family life that gave you this same solid grounding and have probably gone on to create the same experience for your families. But I do think that Mom and Dad generously doled out this love and welcome to so many friends and family in an exceptional way. Over the years, and even this week, friends and family have said that when they visited, they felt a part of a family and a home that Mom and Dad instinctively offered to all. I remember a time when Mom and Dad had gone to visit Signe and Fred and their family somewhere in Southeast Asia. I brought a couple of friends over to see the valley whose landscape I so love and to share the home that shaped me. We had a good time enjoying the valley, but at the end of the visit, I got this definite feeling that this house without Mom and Dad and my sisters was just that, a house, not a home. The home they had built was, in reality, one of the heart and mind, and wasn't limited to one location, regardless of how cherished that place was to us. I know that Mom and Dad wanted to live out their lives in that house on the hill, enjoying the expansive view of their valley. And it was heartbreaking to realize that they had to leave our ancestral home, and that we kids would have to provide the road to a new place that would become their home. They started this final chapter in Linwood with understandable nostalgia and homesickness, but eventually, with patience and their innate dignity, they found home. The attention of wonderful caregivers, the generous gift of time from my sisters, my brothers-in-laws, all the grandkids and grandkids, and the visits of so many of you relatives and friends enabled this place to continue to be their home of the heart. A place of love, acceptance, and belonging. It is fitting, though, that their present resting place, their ultimate place of belonging, is next to each other in their beloved Yakima Valley, their final road home. Rise up, follow me, come away is the call, with the love in your heart as the only song. There is no such beauty as where you belong. Rise up, follow me, I will lead you home. Matt? I don't hear it. before we gather to share more memories and enjoy a reception, if any of you would like a moment to, if you have a brief memory that you'd like to share of our mom, just raise your hand. Please keep things brief, and if there's nothing, that's fine as well. But glad to have any things that we'd like to share.
Our son Oliver was unable to return from Barcelona for his beloved grandparent memorial services, this one or Grandpa's a year ago, but he sent this message. Okay. From the time I was a little kid until well into adulthood, whenever there were bumps in the road, difficult transitions during childhood, moments of big unanswered what comes next questions as a young adult, the time I spent out in Yakima with Grandma and Grandpa was a sort of steadying anchor, a common denominator for much of my life. The years of uncomplicated, unconditional love, kindness, and support from both these wonderful people is something for which I'll be forever grateful. May their memories be as much a blessing for all of you as they are for me.
Thank you, Oliver.
This is from Nathan, Colleen's oldest son. He says, "Hello, family and friends. This is Nate. Or for those of you who don't know me, I'm Nate. It's Nathan. I'm Colleen's son and Carl and Helen's grandson. I was the first grandchild, I think. And I didn't get to say anything at my grandfather's funeral, so I'm going to kind of include that here. I have often heard it said that the funerals aren't for the dead, they are for the living. And they are a way for us to share our grief and celebration of the people who we love. And I don't say loved because I don't think for most of us it's a past tense thing. Everybody's going to say wonderful things that Grandma and Grandpa did, and they'll tell lots of stories and talk about how they were pillars of the community and use that term justifiably in a way that is exceeding the rare today, and how they were the fact of the patriarch and the matriarch of a very large family and some external families that attach themselves to us over the years. And I'm just going to share the two pivotal moments for me. Grandma was always, to me, the brain, and Grandpa, the heart. It's probably, there's some correction, some automatic correction, so it may not make sense. It's probably, maybe that's a unique perspective, but that was mine. And the thing that most impressed me by Grandma was actually very late in her life when she broke her hip. And the doctor said she wasn't ever going to walk again. And I think it was with Bob's help that Grandma called me, and she's like, "Hey, you train people what to do. I have to do what I have to do to be able to walk." And I gave her some exercises. And lo and behold, 2 months later, she was walking. She was tough, and she was smart, and she never quit. And for Grandpa, I remember how he was the father example together with my uncle Bob. But you know, I was around Grandpa a lot when I was little. He was the example of love, even when it had to be tough. And I won't go into the situation because I know people have weird ideas about discipline, that sort of thing today. But there was a time I was acting up. I was 11 years old or so, and he had to discipline me. And after the fact, he cried and simply said to me, he looked at me and he had a tear in his eye about the most he got close to crying. And he simply said, I just want you to know I love you. And the only reason I'm disciplining you is because I want you to know there are consequences for actions. And there's a way we're supposed to act and treat the people that we love. But I also want you to see how it affects me. And I want you to be a good man because it hurts me when you're not. And even just those words affected me so profoundly. I love them and I miss them. And I think that's probably true for all of us here. So, to my dear family and the friends of my family who are there today, sending everybody a big hug. And to Grandma and Grandpa, thank you. I had a pretty cool mom. But I think I would not be the man I am today without both of my grandparents.
Hi, I'm Fred Bruner. I'm one of the sons-in-law, and I married into the Schilperoort clan when I married Signe, who is Helen's doppelganger. One of the things that attracted me most to Signe many years ago is her sense of humor and biting sarcasm. And I did not realize when I married Signe that she also had so much in common personality-wise with her mother. And so I think the point that I want to make here is what I valued so much about Helen was her incredible sense of humor. A few people have alluded to this today. But Helen loved to laugh, and she loved to tease and to joke. And, I saw this the first time, at least that I remember, was Signe and I had been dating for about 4 years. Took me a while to sort of get on board. And I was over at a Christmas Eve Swedish dinner, and at dessert time, lutefisk was terrible, but dessert time with the rice pudding was great. And I remember eating the rice pudding and biting into an almond and thinking, this is a little strange. And Helen looked at me and she said, oh, is there something wrong with your rice pudding? And I said, well, no, but there's an almond in it. And she said, oh, you know what that means? You're the next person getting married. So, hint, hint. And over the years, getting together with Helen was always so much fun because of her eagerness to laugh, her natural sarcasm that I experienced daily with my wife. And, there were many times when Helen and I would get into conversations, sometimes on issues that we disagreed about. And I might say to her, Helen, are you tracking with me? Do you see my point here? And she said, oh yes, because you're probably really an expert on this. And it was dripping with sarcasm, and she'd do it with a really deadpan face. And we would often go back and forth, and if she couldn't think of something to say, and she usually could, but occasionally if she couldn't think of something to say, she'd just look at me with a straight face and just stick her tongue out at me, which I loved. But if the sarcasm went on too long back and forth, she didn't have quite the tolerance for discomfort that Signe has, and she would occasionally stop and say, now Fred, you know that I'm just teasing and I love you, right? And I always knew that was true. So, relationships with mothers-in-law can be difficult for a lot of people. they weren't with Helen for me. If you can talk about anything and you can laugh about lots of things with your mother-in-law, that's a pretty special thing.
Sure is, Bud. Hi, I'm Holly Wilson, and I'm here with my sister Kim Cruz, and we were the neighbors that attached, as someone mentioned earlier, attached ourselves to the Schilperoort family, and we feel so lucky that we were next door neighbors. And my memories are endless, so how dare you put a time limit on me, Bob. But okay, but I'm still bigger than you, watch out. Some of my favorites, though, are the little house at the bottom of the road, and I remember Signe and I having tuna fish sandwiches on the homemade bread that Helen had made, and putting our potato chips in our chocolate milk, and she'd have the window open, you know, at the kitchen sink. They're kind of chatting with us, and Paul Harvey playing on the radio. I can, to this day, hear Paul Harvey's voice. Sharing recipes with me. I grew and pickled beets, and I had a recipe from her mother and mother-in-law, and I used them both. We would talk over that many times. I knew where the hiding place was of the gold cookies. It was a Tupperware container on top of the microwave, and I routinely got into those. I had the pleasure of being brought to the house of the Lord by them, and I was chastised a little bit by Carl because when I got my lifesaver, I didn't suck on it, I chewed it in a half a second. But neither Helen or Carl ridiculed me about messing up my Bible stories, and some of the kids did in the family. I do remember that. Compassion, love, comfort, peace, serenity, all of those words were a constant in their daily home life, their words, their actions. I cannot even begin to tell you the profound effect that they had and all of you kids had on my life, so thank you.
I'm Kim Cruz, and Holly's older sister, although I don't look like the older sister. And I want you to know that I sucked on my lifesaver very patiently. I did not chew it quickly and swallow it. I also had wonderful memories from the two-bedroom home and the new home that was up the hill. I spent so much time there and learned so many things that are such an important foundation to my life today. One of them being the most important is my faith, and the second thing is unconditional love. And I learned that from the Schilperoort family, and I'm just so grateful and thankful for that. Spent wonderful time eating the best of the best food, sleeping and staying in the bunk beds. They always had room. They always had room for everyone. And I often got reprimanded because I didn't want to go home. I wanted to stay for dinner at the Schilperoort house. And one thing, I'm a school teacher, retired school teacher, so this poem just came to my mind instantly when I thought about what would I share. It's called Hug a War. And this is the way it was at the Schilperoort household. I will not play at tug-of-war. I'd rather play at hug-a-war, where everyone hugs instead of tugs, where everyone giggles and rolls on the rug, where everyone kisses and everyone grins and everyone cuddles, and most certainly everyone wins. And I was always a winner. I was always loved and always assured that I was great. So, and I just thank the children for the friendships, babysitting, and bringing my life to Christ. Colleen, thank you. And the long friendships I've had with Susan, Signe, Adriana, Bob. So thank you, and thank you to Helen for raising a magnificent family.
Well, hello, I'm another Kim, and I'm a nephew. My dad was Bill, and a little bit different. And cousin Susan, maybe I'm going to explain to you
you back one time on a motorcycle? Well, let me tell you, my family was overseas my first 10 years of life, longer than we were here, but when we came back, we stayed with relatives, and of course, we stayed with Uncle Carl and Helen's family. And I actually got to go meet the Youngrens, your grandparents. And I'll never forget it, because now I had never really ridden in a car, having been in Africa and being in Iran, other than a taxi. Or actually they had doroshkes, which are carriages pulled by a horse. But anyway, Aunt Helen, we got in that station wagon that you had. You remember that, Bob? And I'll tell you what, we were going over to Natchez to visit, isn't that where they live? Yeah, Selah, I'm sorry, Selah. And she took off, and she could see that I was absolutely terrified. I mean, I'd never driven that fast in my, never anything like that. And she says, "Oh, Kim, well, what's the matter?" I said, "Well, aren't you going too fast?" And she just smiled and turned around, put it down to the floor.
Well, I didn't get to have any pecan pie on the porch up in the upper house. Nectarine? Nectarine. Okay, nectarine pie. But I did have some apple pie once. How many remember the poster on the refrigerator up above that said, "An apple a day"? Remember that? Nobody? Bob remembers. Well, I thought that was a pretty clever poster because it didn't give any medical advice. It just stopped right there. An apple a day, on the blanks yourself, apparently. So I was up there one time visiting Carl and Helen, and I was probably gathering some nectarines or something, free nectarines. He made the best. And they were having apple pie, and Helen said, "Would you like some apple pie?" And I said, "Wow, apple pie? Yeah, that's my favorite." Sure. So she had me sit down at the table, and she cut a piece for Carl, cut a piece for her, and for me, and we ate the apple pie. Well, I apparently said that was the best apple pie I've ever had. She asked me if I wanted a second piece, and I said, "Well, okay, sure." And anyway, the long story short, and Bob did say to keep it short, I ate 3 pieces of pie that day. I don't know who was left out, somebody was probably going to come later that day. They didn't get any pie, but I did.
I'm Phyllis, Phoebe's daughter, and Helen and my mom had a really great relationship. We all did. I can echo all of the adjectives that everyone has said today about Helen, but I have one story that involves my mother, and I talked her into getting kind of a spiky haircut, and she came to the reunion with this spiky haircut, and all the cousins were telling her how darling she looked, and she really did look cute. And Helen said something to the effect to her daughters of, "Don't even think of getting my hair cut like that." If you look at the picture in the program, Helen's hair never changed from this hairstyle.
I'm Donna from Phoebe as well, and I just remember that little house. There were 5 of us kids, and we were all going to go and visit you guys with all your 5 kids in that little house. I still can't get over that we actually all fit in there. It was pretty small. But I do have a really fond memory of Aunt Helen. She gave me my first bone china teacup, and I have had a Wednesday tea every week for quite a long time with my china cups, and it's just been a real fun thing to always tell people about my first china cup when I was graduating from high school, she gave me one. So it was really fun. Nice. So it's wonderful to be here and be able to help everybody celebrate Aunt Helen's life.
Well, I'm Ginger McClellan Clark, and I babysat for Carl and Helen for many years. And one of the things we always had, was on the list that I made sure happened, was that the kids did their piano practicing, and that I timed it and kept them at the piano. So, and we did that, but we still had fun. And I remember there were times that I spent the night, but I don't remember that house being so small. I'm one of 7 children, and going to the Schilperoort house, that wasn't really that much smaller than what we shared at our house. So I never thought of the house being so small, but always loving and warming. And Helen, I like to sing, and she realized that. And I think from the time I was in the 6th grade until I graduated, Helen would say, Ginger, I've got a song you need to learn. I want you to come over. Or I would be there to babysit her. She said, I have this song I want you to learn. So I sang a lot at the Harry Union Church. But I just thank Helen for that. And Carl and I sang a duet a couple times even. And so it was just lots of fun. And if she thought that it was too high, she would say, oh, just a minute. She would just change it and transpose it. And then I went to college as a music major, and I was amazed that these people playing the piano couldn't transpose just on the spot. So I just thought that's the way all pianists did, because I had Helen all that time playing for me. And I just praise God for the love and the direction she gave me in my life.
We'll have plenty of time to share more memories at the reception, but Jan.
I'm Janice, one of the cousins. My dad was Tony and my mom was Alice. And I remember all those fun times, sleeping in bunk beds in their little house, and there was always room. And I even shared in the Saturday night baths and Sunday mornings at Hera Community Church, and that was a foundational time in my life. And actually, our parents even had very close wedding anniversaries, and they would regularly count on that time in November to go out and celebrate and have a really positive time. And just a lot of really wonderful memories growing up with Colleen and Bob and Adriana and Susan and Signe, and just a lot of fun. And my mom, Alice, unfortunately passed away almost 35 years ago. And Alice and Helen, they had a really great friendship, and actually they were very similar in many ways. And so Helen was very, very kind to kind of unofficially kind of adopt me as kind of a daughter over these last several years, and I've so really appreciated that. And just a lot of real positive memories. Matter of fact, my husband John and I would even come over and stay with them and go to the fair, or even take them to a family picnic sometimes, and just had some real positive times. And we missed that the last several years, but we knew that they needed to move on to Seattle and those end parts of their lives. But I was so grateful, and Helen was such a wonderful mentor, and she had such a warm heart, like you've all heard, but also a deep faith. And that was a legacy that I know that she would want you all to share in, if you haven't already. So thank you, and you guys, this is a wonderful celebration of your mom's life.
Hey again, I didn't talk at my grandpa's memorial, so I'll talk now. I'm the second oldest. I'm gonna be 45 this year. Yay! So Jordan and I and my older brother Nathan, we lived in Wapato on the Yakima Reservation for a long time in the house that my grandparents first lived in with their children. And one of the funnest things that I remember with my brother Jordan is, since we're in our 40s now, there was a time when there were actually like Saturday morning cartoons and Saved by the Bell, you know, that's Gen X kids. And afterwards, we would walk all the way up the hill to see Grandma and Grandpa so that we could have our homemade waffles. Delectable. And when there was fresh fruit on them, oh man. And I remember her being in the kitchen making homemade whipped cream, and we just be eating that and enjoying it. And I remember sometimes with pancakes, I'm like, why is Grandpa dumping like pure corn syrup on these pancakes? I'm like, that's a lot of sugar, Grandpa. But I didn't say anything, you know. But I'm just thinking like, that is not Mrs. Butterworth. But yeah, so I lived a lot of my life on the Yakima Reservation, and I moved back in 2021, and I started to have an even stronger appreciation, getting back in touch with so many Native American friends, going to the Longhouse, helping take care of Grandpa and Grandma, even living in their home after they left. And a lot of the time I was there alone, and one person in Yakima said, aren't you scared out at that house all by yourself? No. So I'd go out on the deck and just look at the view, and I could think about my grandparents and all of my family and all of the great times we had, even when it was 2 degrees once. And I took pictures of the beautiful sunrise at like 7 in the morning, just knowing that I have all these memories with my family, and sitting looking at birds with my grandparents, seeing hawks, just playing in the orchard with Jordan, climbing the bends, you're not supposed to do that, and and other things. And so I just, you know, my grandparents we were always around them until we moved to Prosser. And I have a lot of great memories with my grandma and my grandpa. Thank you.
Thank you. If you have any more comments or memories, let's just share them when we have our time in the fellowship hall. I guess the hymn is number 33. 30, what's it say in there? Oh, okay. So hymn 33. So, I know, but we'll have a benediction, and we'll sing, and family members are gonna get out of here while you're singing the hymn so we can be out there to greet you. And then when the hymn is completed, please join us in the fellowship hall. Okay, sisters?
May the Lord bless you and keep you. May God's face shine upon you. May God be gracious to you.
May God give you grace to love with all your heart, that you may do justice.
To love with all your soul, that you may show kindness.
To love with all your mind, that you may walk humbly with your God. Friends, love the Lord your God with all your might, and love your neighbor as yourself.
Go in peace to serve Christ. Hymn 33.